Hello and very warm welcome to English News Bulletin. Here with you with top stories from Turkey and Kurdistan. A track bomb was set off remotely in the town of Terbesiye in West Kurdistan, Rojava on Sunday, killing 13 civilians. Cizre County Interior Minister Ikram Berekat said that thousands of people had also been injured, many of them seriously. The truck was left on the direct Terbesiye road close to the market. Rojava public security officials confirmed that the explosion was not a suicide and that truck bombs were not a method used by a radical Islamist group. Officials said the explosion openly targeted the civilians. Terbesiye has frequently been targeted. On 26th of March, a vehicle bomb exploded in the town. Following the occupation of Mosul, YPG forces have lent their support to the Peshmerga forces in clashes with ISIS gangs on the Rojava-South Kurdistan border, killing an ISIS leader. YPG forces are now in control of an area on the border from Til Kocher to 10 kilometers south of the village of Jaza. On Friday, YPG and Peshmerga forces held a meeting to cooperate for the protection of the border areas.
Following the occupation of Mosul by ISIS gangs, People's Defense Forces of Rojava, YPG, announced that they were ready to help the Peshmerga forces in the defense of South Kurdistan and acted in a coordinated way with the Peshmerga forces. YPG commander Ferhat Hevler said ISIS gangs had attacked a military post on the border where Peshmerga were deployed and that YPG forces had gone to the area to support the Peshmerga. He said in clashes that lasted 7 hours they had killed many gang members, including an emir, a leader. He added that ISIS controlled a corridor from Tel Hamis in West Kurdistan to the village of Selimiye in South Kurdistan and on to Mosul. This area is to the northwest of Sinjar, where there are many Yazidi villages. Hevler added that sporadic clashes were continuing in the area and that they would continue to support the Peshmerga forces. It is reported that on Friday, YPG and Peshmerga forces held a cooperation meeting for the common defense of the Sunniye borderline, which is 13 kilometers to the town Jaza in Rojava, as well as the border regions of Sinjar, Til Kocher and Rabia. The meeting was held between the commanders of YPG and Peshmerga forces to discuss the protection of the Rojava and South Kurdistan border, as well as the protection of civil people on both sides of the border. Following the meeting, it has been reported that the meetings between YPG and Peshmerga forces will continue to be held regularly. The border area around the town Til Kocher and Jaza is controlled by YPG, while the Rabia area across from Til Kocher is being controlled by Peshmerga forces.
After Islamic State of Iraq and 11 ISIS gangs took control of Mosul and some other cities, Iraqi soldiers have also fled to Kirkuk. The city has thus come fully under the control of Peshmerga forces.
Peshmerga spokesman Jabbar Yaver declared that all of Kirkuk and the surrounding area has been taken under the control of the Peshmerga. He also stated that currently no Iraqi soldiers are left in Kirkuk. Kirkuk, which has a population of 1,200,000, is located at the center of an oil region. After capturing Mosul, ISIS has taken many districts around the city when the Iraqi army withdrew. Following the capture of Mosul by ISIS gangs, PUK and KDP Peshmerga fighters have begun to reinforce the defenses of the city of Kirkuk. Checkpoints and extra security measures have been established on the Kirkuk-Mosul-Baghdad, Kirkuk-Süleymaniye and Kirkuk-Hevler roads. On the Kirkuk-Süleymaniye road, PUK fighters are traveling to the Mosul front with heavy weapons in lorries, minibuses and automobiles. Peshmergas have also been deployed in the areas of Havija, Jalavla and Kanakin, as well as the area between Kirkuk and Mosul. Meanwhile, security measures have been stepped up all over Kurdistan. PUK Peshmergas we spoke to on the Kirkuk-Süleymaniye road said that following the capture of Mosul by ISIS, thousands of Peshmerga had volunteered to go to the Mosul border area.
Now, commenting on this, Professor Abbas Vali is going to join us live from Istanbul. Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening.
Islamic State of Iraq and 11 ISIS gangs took control of Mosul and some other cities. Now, looking at this chaotic situation in South Kurdistan, what would you say about the implication of those recent events in Mosul?
Well, implications are manifold in the sense that it has implication for internal politics of Iraq. It also has implications for the regional politics in the Middle East. To start with the implications for the internal politics of Iraq, I believe it shows the incapacity, if not illegitimacy, of Mr. Maliki's government, his inability to use power to rule, his politics of factionalism, marginalization of the Sunnis, trouble with the Kurds, and also factionalism inside the Shi'i camp. These are all consequences of his policies, and now the results have come to home to roost, and this is what we have. But insofar as the immediate consequence of it is that I think this crisis above all has showed that Mr. Maliki and his government do not have control of the armed forces and the repressive apparatuses of the state, which are necessary for control and rule in Iraq, are out of their control. And this is the reason why they have started calling on people to come and help to stop the ISIS or advancing towards Baghdad. I think here, in terms of regional politics, the most immediate impact of it is the inefficacy, or rather a failure, of the Iranian policy in Iraq. And this policy, of course, was successful insofar as the Americans were the major target and objective of this politics. But ever since the American moved out, the relationship between the Iranian government and the Maliki's government in Iraq has created the conditions for animosity and hostility of various groups. This is also now, I think the Iranian government is in a position, or must be in a position, to rethink its policy. It's something that it was expected to be done after the recent elections in Iraq, but it didn't do it. I think now the situation is such that it is very clear that the policy of factionalism, religious factionalism, playing the Shi'is against the Sunnis and so on, is no longer going to work in Iraq. The other thing is, of course, regionally, is the difficulties brought about by the, if you like, a U-turn in American policy since last summer regarding Syria. I think this was one reason why the jihadists and the takfiris in Iraq, in Syria, started spilling over to Iraq. I think this is one of the reasons for that. I think the Americans also must be in a position to rethink their policies in the region. The third important issue is, of course, the situation of the Kurdish government in Iraq and other Kurdish forces, particularly in Syria, and, of course, Kurdish forces of Turkey, which are in the Iraqi territory. Basically, I think this crisis has a major implication for their positions as well. I think what has happened now in Iraq, the crisis of authority, crisis of sovereignty, which has dominated Iraqi politics at present, has worked in the interest of the KRG, the Kurdish regional government there, and they have been able to capture Kirkuk and establish their forces there. I think this is quite an important thing. Now, it means that the situation of crisis has given the Kurds a weight in Iraqi politics, which is above their real weight. I think basically the important thing, the skillful thing should be done by Kurdish leadership of Iraqis to keep this weight that they have there and try to use it to their advantage. Insofar as the wider perspective of the Kurdish forces are concerned, I must say that it is absolutely necessary for Kurdish forces, PYD, KDP, PUK, and PKK, to form a kind of united command, temporary united command against the forces of ISIS, and try to protect the borders at this. The borders between Iraq and Syria have totally collapsed, and the Islamists and jihadists are freely coming and going and bringing reinforcements from there. But now I think if they have a united command, they can stop these borders, and also they can protect themselves. The important thing is that for the Kurd forces to try to protect themselves without getting into this conflict. Of course, the situation of Kurds of Syria is different here. They are in the conflict and may be drawn further into this conflict, but I think the other Kurdish forces must help to stop this happening. One important thing also has to be said here is that the crisis that we are witnessing in Iraq at present, it is not just the making of the jihadis and jihadist forces or the Takfiri forces or the ISIS forces or the Islamic State of Iraq and Levant. It is not just them, but it is with cooperation with all the Ba'athist forces who have collaborators inside the Iraqi army, and they seem to have formed a united command structure which is known as the Sunni opposition to the state. There seems to be three major Sunni forces working with the jihadis and takfiris, and it is their combined forces which has overrun the state and forces, the government forces, and the situation is one of critical conditions. I think this situation has put an end to the federal structure in Iraq, and the new structure which is to emerge must be rethought and must be reconditioned according to the circumstances which are taking shape there. But I again emphasize that this crisis has given the Kurds opportunity, Kurds of Iraq particularly, to advance, to consolidate and augment and increase their power. I think if they are wise, they must use this to their advantage.
Mr. Vali, I would like to ask another question. Do you see any possibility of open military intervention in Iraq by Turkish army?
I think that this option is rather limited. I don't think that it is very much on the agenda now. I think Turkish army would think twice getting into this question. It's a quagmire of religious and ethnic factionalism. It is for any army to enter there must, think that it may be a long, protracted thing. It is very costly, and it might have adverse consequences for the Turkish government when it is moving towards two major elections at home. I think this is unlikely. It can only be likely that if Turkey, as a member of NATO, is, if you like, allowed or asked to move in, and that will include, if you like, encouragement by the United States of America. That will include also encouragement and approval by EU and NATO forces. But I think at present, Turkey does not or would not want to do that, and I think that this possibility is rather low. I wouldn't worry about this. I think this can only get into a situation of Turkish intervention if Iraq really falls into parts and it is, if you like, disintegrating, and there is a possibility of re-emergence of parts as independent and independent, if you like, states, including and especially an independent Kurdish state. If such a thing happens, if such a thing happens, then I would say Turks might intervene. But at present, I think this likelihood is very low.
Mr. Vali, I actually would like to ask a last question. I know we have limited of time, but I would like to ask this question as well. Is an independent state of Kurdistan viable as a result of current crisis, do you think?
I think it can be viable depending on what else might happen in the region. If Iraq disintegrates, this part, and it is broken into three parts, Shi'i South, and the Sunni East and the Kurdish North. I think in which case the situation in the region would be such that some of the neighbors and the United States of America and EU would want to save at least parts of this. In situations like that, they may throw their weight and support behind the Kurdish, but otherwise, I think it is very difficult to see how in the long run, in the face of the adversity from inside and outside, such an entity can survive. But I think at present the dice have not fallen. We don't know what is going to be regional outcome of this. What is clear now that Iraq has become the stage of the conflict and rivalry between Saudi Arabia and some of the other Arab states, Gulf region on the one hand, and Iran on the other. I think they are balancing Iran's gains in Syria. It is very likely that in Iraq probably they will try to force Iran to limit its powers. And if that happens, there has to be a new government in Iraq. I think they're going, by doing so, limit the possibility of disintegration of Iraq. But if Iraq disintegrates, a Kurdish state emerges, the possibility of its survival would depend on the form of disintegration of Iraq in the first place, and secondly, on the configuration of forces, alliances, and in the region, and how they are going to cope with this crisis in Iraq, and how they're going to see their interests either being threatened by the Kurdish state or being, if you like, supported and saved by that Kurdish state.
Thank you.
It is very early to say that.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Professor Mr. Abbas Vali. Thanks for your participation and thanks for your evaluation. It was great to have you.
Thank you very much. Thanks. And good night to you.
Good night. An Iraqi airstrike hit a convoy of Peshmerga forces in the area of Saudiya district of the city of Jalaula. It was not immediately clear if the Saturday night attack near Jalaula was specifically targeting the Kurdish troops or a case of mistaken identity. Later on, the Iraqi officials said that the target of the attack was ISIS and mistakenly hit the Peshmerga forces and apologized for the attack. The Ministry of Peshmerga announced that 6 Peshmergas were killed in the attack on Soma, 23 others were wounded. The clashes between the ISIS gangs and Peshmerga forces continue in the region of Jalaula. In the meantime, an explosion near Rabia, border area between South and West Kurdistan, killed 2 Peshmergas. It is reported that ISIS has been taken the responsible of the explosion. The Kurdish Communities Union KJK Executive Council Co-Presidency has issued a statement calling on the Kurdish people to change their forms of the action.
KCK says the actions such blockading roads, establishing security checkpoints, capturing police or soldiers should not be carried out in this period, stating that keeping the shutters of shops closed is also not an appropriate type of action. The KCK said the business of the shopkeepers and all economic facilities should not be stopped unless it proves necessary, remarking that the protest actions against the construction of military posts that have gone on since the middle of May were all legitimate. The KCK said the actions in Lice and Mesken had proved to be successful in obtaining important results. The KCK added, but the forms of action must be different in this period, adding that the protests against the construction of military posts must be carried out in a democratic way. KCK called on all the forces having a responsibility for the process, including primarily the government, to evaluate the situation correctly and to develop the requisite positive attitudes. KCK recalled first the manifesto of the Kurdish leader Abdullah Öcalan for a democratic solution of the Kurdish question and the democratization of Turkey, which was read out during Nowruz celebrations in Ahmed in 2013. The KCK emphasized that the declaration of Öcalan was not only to bring an opportunity for the democratization of Turkey, but also for the whole Middle East. The KCK stressed that the AKP government has pursued a policy that is disrupting the basis of a solution for the last 1.5 years. Drawing attention to the resistance of people against the construction of military posts and dams for military use, KCK said the attacks and provocations have increased in the period in which Kurdish people have stepped up their struggle. The AKP enthusiastically made use of the flag provocation in order to cover up the massacre in Lice and its inaction for a solution, as well as to use other forces to prevent a solution being found to the Kurdish question. By making use of the lowering of the flag, both the government and other political forces are engaged in stirring up chauvinism and hostility against the Kurds, said the KCK. The KCK further emphasized that the resistance of people against the construction of military posts was absolutely legitimate and said, from now on, democratic actions to protest the construction of military posts and to force the government to take steps for the resolution of the Kurdish question must continue. However, actions like blockading roads, setting up security points, the seizing of soldiers and police must not be carried out in this period. Additionally, the protest against closing the shutters of shops, which must only be carried out in the face of serious incidents and massacres, will not be useful in this period, because these kinds of actions prove influential only when necessary and may even be harmful when untimely. KCK concluded its statement with a warning to the AKP and said the followings. The AKP government must understand correctly the change in the forms of action and the will of the Kurdish people to continue their struggle on a democratic and legitimate basis, and must stop the construction of military posts and dams for military use, and must immediately respond positively to the efforts of leader Apu for a solution of the Kurdish question and the democratization of Turkey, in a period during which important and rapid developments are taking place in the Middle East.
The Conference of the Freedom for Öcalan for Peace platform on world experiences and the role of leaders was held in Istanbul on Saturday. The conference was held on Saturday, 14th of June at 10 a.m. at the Taksim Light World Hotel. The conference was organized by the Freedom for Öcalan for Peace platform spokesperson and a member of the delegation of the WISE, Zubeyde Teker. At the first session of the conference, the Basque motto was discussed. John Lucia from the Basque Sorto Party attended to the conference as a speaker. In the second session, the Colombian model was evaluated.
Support for the resolution of the conflict and the negative of the Spanish.
Now, to get more information about the conference which was held in Taksim of Istanbul, member Freedom for Öcalan for Peace platform, Semra Toprak, is going to be with us. Good evening to you, Ms. Toprak.
Good evening.
You, as Freedom for Öcalan for Peace platform, organized a conference under the title of World Experiences and the Role of Leaders. Could you tell our viewers how the conference go, the purpose of organizing such conference?
As you mentioned, our platform is organizing some conferences, and we are going to organize 3 conferences. We had one yesterday. Mm-hmm. The conference was about the peace talks and experiences of other conflict areas and also the role of the leaders. Mm-hmm. And the yesterday conference, we got information from Basque people and also from Colombian experiences. Mm-hmm. And I think audience was happy with the information that was provided. We've got very detailed information from experts. Mm-hmm. Yes, what was the other thing?
Ms. Toprak, could you tell us the purpose of organizing this conference? And will it continue from now on? When will be the second conference will be held?
Okay, the aim of conference was to get detailed information about the processes from different countries. As I told you, the yesterday conference was from Basque and Colombia. They shared us their experiences. Mm-hmm. and focused on the methodology they've used, the difficulties they faced during the process, mm-hmm. the socioeconomic effects of the negotiation processes, and also the role of the leaders during the negotiations. So we are planning to organize more conferences. The second one will be about Ireland's experience, mm-hmm. and the third one will be about South African experience. Mm-hmm. And we are planning to organize a 4th conference, and we are asking people to attend all of the conferences, mm-hmm. so to be able to discuss what will be our process, what are we going to do for the solution.
Mm-hmm. And the 3rd conference, according to information that we gathered, you as a platform going to invite such the leader of Jerry Adams, Mr. Jerry Adams, and you're aiming to invite Tony Blair. Is that correct?
Yes, we are in process of getting some appointments to talk with them. We already sent them some information, and we are trying to meet with them to invite them to our conference. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Semra Toprak, Freedom for Öcalan for Peace platform. Thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Politicians from Colombia and Basque countries who participated to the Conference of World Experiences and the Role of Leaders, which was held in Istanbul, spoke about the peace process in Turkey.
This is a very important element in peace processes. In the case of Colombia, it really helped to build up trust between the parties. The government, acknowledging the wrongdoings of the past, is sending a very clear message not only to FARC, but to the whole Colombian society, that they are willing to start a new beginning in Colombian history. This has joined some trend that has taken place at the international level. You have seen governments like the Australian government, even the British government, and some other governments who actually have apologized for the wrongdoings of the past. And I know that in some cases, for the Turkish government, has been more difficult to recognize these wrongdoings. I think that's part of a peace process. As a demonstration of goodwill, it would be important that both parties recognize the wrongdoings of the past, because only by the recognition of the wrongdoings of the past, reconciliation can start taking place, as it happened in South Africa, in Northern Ireland, and in so many other countries. There is a need to democratize the peace process. I think to have only one person sitting on one side of the table and 3 other people meeting once a month is not good enough. This needs to be a process in which the whole movement behind the ceasefire gathered together and managed to put some thoughts across the table. What I think is that if you had more regular meetings and for a longer period of time, then you could build some trust between the parties, and probably you could move faster. I think that has been the case in the Colombian experience, and not only in the Colombian experience, but in other processes. You need to create a more open table where you bring different parties, where you bring more elements than 1 or 3 on the one side, and that they meet more than 2 or 3 days. They need to have regular meetings that go on for days.
It is important to overcome the obstacles in a process, and to avoid the dependence of the total dependence of the process and the willingness of the states and the governments, and in this case the government, the Turkish government, to activate social actors in favor of peace, and to activate the social demand for peace that force the government, in this case AKP government, to make steps in favor a real process. From the international arena, of course, it is also important to especially support this social activation for peace, and to demand real resolution of the conflict, and demand clear steps from the Turkish government. From our side, our party is clear. We demand significant talks and dialogue and negotiation with the Kurdish movement. We demand that the leader of the Kurdish movement has to have free space to be part, real actor in this negotiation and dialogue process, and for that it's important that Mr. Öcalan is released as soon as possible. That there are conditions for talks, so that the military occupation in the southeast of the Turkey is over as soon as possible. So those are basic demands to facilitate a process, not conditions, but clear demands from our side to start a process. And at the end, any process, negotiation process, dialogue process, has to be in the hands of the society itself. So the important role of the society and our experiences. So, okay, if the governments are not willing, the states are not willing to be involved, we have to mobilize as much as possible, so that they are forced to be involved in the process. It's the best model for you here in the process in Kurdistan. It's something that has to be agreed and decided by the actors here, because I could propose them.
This was it from us for tonight. We will see you next week on Thursday at the same time. Thanks for watching us. Goodbye.